Well, joining us once again is Eric Bay for the Weekly Sports Panel. Eric, it's been a big couple of days here in the NHL playoffs. Of course, we now know who the teams are going to be in the playoffs for the official start of it. Let's start with the Tampa Bay Columbus series. It's a rematch of last year. A lot of people were surprised that Toronto didn't score the last game there, but let's just talk about that Tampa Bay Columbus series. It should be a very, very feisty rematch there.
Yeah, obviously going to be a very interesting matchup here, as you mentioned, a big rematch coming up, and it's going to be pretty interesting just the fact that Toronto and Tampa Bay are kind of similar teams, and maybe they're a little more offensively focused. So I really think the Blue Jackets will match up well again. Just looking how they played the Maple Leafs in this last series, the Maple Leafs put all their big guns on that one line. So maybe not the same depth that Tampa does have, but it should be pretty interesting. I think Columbus will be able to keep the scoring low. It'll be up to their goalies, Jonas Korpisalo and Elvis Merzlikins, to keep that one close. However, I think Tampa is going to be a little bit hungrier than they were maybe last year when they did get swept. So I think this one will be pretty evenly matched. However, I do think Tampa has a good shot to move on to the next round.
And one thing, too, at Tampa Bay, they don't have Steven Stamkos or Victor Hedman right now, so that'll definitely be a major factor there. Another interesting matchup there, it's the top-seeded Philadelphia Flyers against the bottom-seeded Montreal Canadiens, a series where Montreal did not expect to go past the qualifying round against Sidney Crosby and the Penguins, but with this Montreal, they've gotten contributions from everybody, especially down the middle with their center depth being so good.
Yeah, I would say that for sure, and also just their goaltending. Obviously, Carey Price has not maybe played to the level of the Carey Price we know from years past, these last couple of years, but he really showed up this last series. And again, this is the thing with bubble hockey, is really anybody can get hot, and we really have no idea how it's going to look for any team going into any series, even from day to day. The one thing I will say, though, about the Philadelphia Flyers, they were maybe the hottest team in the league when the NHL season was suspended. They had just finished a 9-game win streak about that time, and also have kept rolling here throughout the playoffs. They have some of those younger guys, the Travis Konecnys, also Kevin Hayes as well, are kind of starting to lead that team. So I really feel like Philly has a good shot here to run the table, but again, a very tough and interesting matchup when all the pressure's on you as the number 1 seed, and Montreal, has a chance to continue to go far if they get some solid goaltending.
Yeah, it'll be a goaltending battle for sure, as Carter Hart has played very, very well for the Flyers. Another one here, it's former coach going against former team here, the Washington Capitals against the New York Islanders in the series there. And there's lots of similarities between these two teams as well, both pretty well balanced there, Eric. I know goaltending, they're matched up there. Where do you see that one going?
It's tough. I think all of these series are really tough to kind of predict at this point. However, I do like the Islanders just based on their overall scheme. Again, we've still seen here in the playoffs, just looking at that Maple Leafs Blue Jacket series, defense wins championships is what I like to go by, and I think that the Islanders structure will really help them moving forward. However, again, you can't ignore Washington and what they have up front. The one question mark, I guess you could say, or maybe concern, is Braden Holtby. Again, another goalie who we've seen maybe not at his best in the last couple of years. So if he can steal a few games or even just give them some pretty solid goaltending, I think the Capitals will be in a good shape. But again, hard to ignore the Islanders with their coaching and their structure overall.
And lastly, it's the Boston Bruins taking on the Carolina Hurricanes. Boston has not played pretty well in the round robin, but the Carolina Hurricanes played really well in the qualifiers against the Rangers, where everyone kind of wrote out the Hurricanes. They have a really good offensive group there, led by Aho and Svechnikov, and also a great blue line led there by Slavin. And Peter Mrazek has been really, really good. Will he be considered maybe an X factor in that series if they are going to take down Boston?
Oh, definitely, for sure. I think goaltending really, either way you go, because they did play James Reimer for one game too. I think goaltending is going to be big for Carolina to go far, because as these goals get tougher, you're going to need your goalie to bail you out. And again, you mentioned Svechnikov and Aho were lights out in the qualifying round. So it's going to be as far as those guys could take them, with some help from the goaltending side of things as well. And I think they are ripe to go far. Just the fact that you mentioned the Bruins not playing their best hockey and really at a disadvantage with this season stoppage. They were 10 points above anybody else in the league and now slipped to 4th, didn't win a game in that round robin. So I think Boston is going to be in some pretty big trouble here. I don't know if it's just the fact that Tuukka Rask was unable to play for a few games, or just some of the old guys having some trouble getting their wheels under them. But this is trouble for Boston, I think, and we could definitely see Carolina with their players. And then Rod Brind'Amour as well has proven to be a very solid coach. I think they could go far as well, maybe conference finals or further.
We did talk about the Eastern Conference matchups. Now we're talking about the Western Conference. Let's start with Dallas and Calgary, Eric. I know Calgary was really, really good against the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, mind you, the Jets did lose some players to injury, but now with Dallas, they're also losing some key guys as they're deemed unfit to play. Calgary seems like they have the upper hand against Dallas at this point.
Yeah, again, I think Calgary was obviously very fortunate as they were the highest remaining seed too, as the 8th seed coming out of that qualifying round, so they'll be playing the 4th seed there. And I think also what will help them too is, you mentioned they did look pretty good against what was a depleted Jets lineup, to be fair. However, I think that playing those hard-fought games also saw a lot of that playoff atmosphere in all 4 of those games. So I think that will help them going in to a team that kind of struggled and is also 1-7-2 if you count their games before the NHL season was shut down, which I mean, obviously it doesn't matter at this point, but it's kind of something to look at as they continue to slide here in that qualifying round, or the round robin, excuse me. So I do think Calgary's in good shape. It depends, though. Again, as always, their top scorers are kind of spotty in the playoffs. So Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan, those guys will need to continue to put up points like they did in that qualifying round.
Well, Gaudreau finally got on the board as opposed to the last playoffs where he didn't really do much against the Colorado Avalanche. Now, speaking of the Colorado Avalanche, they're going to take on the Arizona Coyotes, a team that has a really good lineup there in Colorado, Eric. But Darcy Kemper really stole the show there against the Nashville Predators in that round robin, where a lot of people did kind of write out the Coyotes in that regard there as a lower seeded team. So, what's Arizona going to have to do if they are going to take down the Avalanche?
They're going to need to score more. This is a lineup that doesn't really produce a ton of offense. And Darcy Kemper, you're right, he was lights out, excuse me. But again, it was against kind of a depleted Nashville lineup, and just the fact that their top guys haven't really performed at all throughout the entire season, and it continued to stay that way in the qualifying round. And they're going to be facing a much better, much hungrier Colorado Avalanche offense. So I think Kemper's going to have to steal the show a little bit, but he can't do it all by himself. So you're going to need guys like Taylor Hall, Philip Kessel, those guys to step up, score some big goals at key times, because you can't win all those games, I don't think, 1-0, 2-1 against an offense like the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, they're going to definitely have to get some help from all areas, especially on their blue line as well. Now, the Vegas-Chicago matchup, no one kind of thought this would happen. Everyone also wrote out the Blackhawks early on against the Edmonton Oilers, but of course we did see the Blackhawks storm through the Oilers and Connor McDavid and their whole blue line as well in Edmonton. But Vegas has a much different blue line than the Edmonton Oilers do, as well as goaltending will be interesting to see who gets the start between the Blackhawks there. So just talk about the Vegas-Chicago matchup and what Vegas will have to do to shut down the Kane and Taves pair there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Vegas is a much deeper team all around than Edmonton. Obviously, Edmonton kind of falls off, but really you're going to have to shut down those big forwards. Taves was a beast against the Oilers, as well as Kirby Dach, kind of a surprise and a very pleasant one for the Blackhawks. But I think you really have to shut down those top 2 guys and just get a ton of shots, because as well as Corey Crawford did play, he again has maybe some injury concerns, also just some spotty play recently as well. So I think really the Vegas Golden Knights just have to play their game and not get too in their head about the pressure of being that #1 seed, which maybe might have happened as well with Edmonton as the top seed in that qualifying round. So I think really Vegas just needs to stick to their game and trust what they have, including their goaltender, Marc-Andre Fleury. He's been a big playoff performer recently. So as long as they can kind of keep steady as they've been going here in the past, I think they'll be all right. But you can't count out those old guys. Obviously, a ton of experience, Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves. So it should be a pretty fun series to watch.
Yeah, that Chicago defense was definitely the story in that Edmonton series. And lastly, Eric, the St. Louis Blues against the Vancouver Canucks. Now, one thing, of course, the Blues are big, they're physical, and then the Vancouver Canucks, the kind of opposite. They're still big, but they have a lot of speed and skill. And you look at a team that forechecks really hard, like the Blues, and going up against smaller defensemen like Quinn Hughes. How are the Canucks going to manage the physicality there against St. Louis?
They're going to have to move the puck, really, is kind of the end of story. You mentioned fast and skilled, and those guys are going to need the puck on their sticks. We're talking the Brock Bessers, the Elias Petterssons. Those guys need the puck. They need to be moving it quick and try to keep it out of their zone as much as possible. They gave up a ton of shots in the regular season, and Jacob Markstrom, again, ton of shots he saw in the qualifying round, and also maybe wasn't as solid as he was in that regular season. So he's going to have to continue to make big saves like he did earlier on. But again, just keep that puck out of your zone and try to keep your defenseman from getting hit, because you mentioned St. Louis, big, strong guys, but maybe a half a step slower. So if Vancouver can move those pucks, they'll be okay. But it, again, should be a pretty tough series, and 2 different philosophies kind of going at it. So we'll see which one wins out there.
Absolutely. It's going to be great playoffs nonetheless. Eric, thanks a lot for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.